Okay, class, in this video, I'm going to set up direct access. Sorry, my voice is still hoarse over this cold. So the first thing I'm going to do is update my diagram. So in the last time we played around with that, I had 8 public IPs. I want to change that so I only have one. I also want to demonstrate how to do PAT, which is port address translation, as opposed to NAT that we've been doing, where we had a one-to-one relationship. We had uh, dot 8 associated with the web server, dot 7 associated with eDNS2, and dot 6 associated with eDNS1. So what I'm going to do is um, change this. So it only has one public IP, and then I'm just going to remove this from the network. And we're just going to pretend this is our direct access client, even though we're not going to configure this in our network. So right now, in one of the live sessions, I changed this IP. So we're going to assign an IP address of 172.16.0.7. So I'm going to save this. I'm just going to call this .2. Okay, so this is going to be our working network. One 172.16.0.7. That's going to be the IP of our direct access server. So the direct access server is going to kind of be like a VPN server. But the problem with VPN is configuring the VPN. A lot of times people go out in the field, they've never used VPN before, and then your tech support is having to talk some sort of administrator or non-techie person how to set up the VPN connection from a hotel room or something like that. And the tech person doesn't know the network that they're dealing with, so it's going to be hard for the tech person, plus it's going to be hard for the administrator who doesn't deal with tech at all. That's where the beauty of direct access comes into play. What it basically does is it configures the connection automatically through a group policy. So you would configure this laptop in the network, and when they leave the network, the laptop will sense it's no longer part of the work network and automatically connect back through through to your DA server. It'll actually make a connection between this laptop all the way into the DA and secure that connection with um, an SSL certificate, a web certificate. Now, the one thing I wanted to point out, I could put the DA here, but I decided to put it back here just so I didn't confuse you and think we were using the VPN server when we're not. So when the client is inside the network, it'll be able to talk to the web probe host, and that could point to any web server. And basically, the web probe host lets the direct access client know that it's inside the private network. So when you move that laptop outside the network, it can no longer communicate with the web probe host. And at that point, it knows it's outside the network, and then the direct access policies will kick in, and at that point, connect them through the router to the DA. And at that point, they'll connect to the DA, and from there, they'll get routed to any machine that they need access to. So it'll appear like they're inside the network, but in reality, they're not. Where our direct access, excuse me, where our VPN was actually using a private IP address, an IPv4 address, direct access is going to use all IPv6 addresses. And the nice thing about direct access is it will configure all the IPv6 addresses for us. Um, and this machine will act as kind of like a router. It'll act as a DNS server to resolve all those names to IPv6 addresses. and do everything for us on our behalf. So it really automates this remote access a lot more than the VPN server did. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our DA and configure our IP address and join it to the domain. All my machines have properly synced times. I checked out those all out. Everything is booted at this point. Okay, so ipconfig. I'm currently getting a dynamic IP address from my DHCP server. It's a server, so I need a static IP address. New net IP 172.16.0.7 according to the map 0.7. Our prefix is 16 bits. So I set my IP. Now I'm going to set my DNS. I'm going to point to DC1 and DC2 for DNS. If I wanted to, this machine only has one network card. So I could just put a wildcard character, meaning I want to set this as the DNS servers for all my network interfaces. I only have one. I'm doing that because I'm lazy. As opposed to typing Ethernet, I can just type asterisk. And if I do an ipconfig, all, I can see that I now have a static IP. I'm going to rename my computer DA. No, I don't want to rename. I want to join it to the domain and rename. Okay, so basically it's going to execute this command first. And what this command does is it pops up a dialog box, prompts you for your password, and then when you click OK, it saves that as an authentication object, and then it passes that authentication object to the full command. So here's my dialog box. That's this portion of my script running. When I click OK, it nests that authentication object inside of that full script. Now I'm rebooting. So while that's rebooting, the next thing I want to do is go to my DC. launch DNS, and guys, what I'm doing right now is just to get this lab to work. I need to make sure that I can resolve our public IP address to a name. And I'm just going to do it in my internal for right now. In real life, I'd probably do this in my external server, but I'm doing this so when I go through the DA wizard, it'll fix it for me. It'll be able to resolve this name. So I'm going to press cancel. So I'm going to create a reverse zone for my public network inside. Then I'm going to go to my forward lookup zone, create a new record for public. That's my public IP. That will be my public IP once I'm done with my NAT. So that created public right there, and it also created a pointer record for public. So anywhere in my inside network, I will be able to resolve that name. public.contoso.com, and it resolved it no problem to my public IP. And if I set type equal PTR, and it'll also resolve the IP to the name as well. So it does the reverse. When you go through the direct access wizard, it needs to know your public IP because that's what it's going to pass to clients. So when a client is moved out to the internet, it needs to be able to resolve that name to your public IP. I could have done it here, but the problem is the direct access is in the inside. So I need to be able to tell the direct access what my public IP will be for people when they're out in the internet. So the next thing I need to do, and again, this is not something I would normally need to do, but when I go and configure the direct access server, it's going to do something called a WMI filter. And basically, it will query the machines and apply this policy to all laptops, which in a normal working environment, that's great because when a machine leaves the network from here and goes out to the internet, most likely it's going to be a laptop. You're not going to take a desktop machine and carry it outside your network. You're not going to take a server and carry it outside your network. So it's going to query your entire network and say, apply this policy to all laptops. Well, the network that we're actually setting up right now, we don't have laptops. This is just a demonstration lab. So I can't go by the default policy because it just won't work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a group. I'm in Active Directory users and computers. I'm going to create a new group called Direct Access Clients and click OK. So if I had any computers that I needed to get this policy, I would just add them to that group. And I'll show you where we'll use that later. We can create a fake computer account, new computer account, and I can call it fake. And I can add it to a group. I'll show you a little trick. I only have one group that starts with direct. It's called Direct Access Clients. If I just click OK, it'll figure it out. I don't have to type the full name. I just have to type whatever is unique. So it automatically added it to that group. So the last thing I need to do is reconfigure my NAT router so we can deal with PAT instead of DAT. Okay, I'm going to sign in. Now I could have kept the same network set up with all my NAT, but I just want to show you a bunch of different ways to do things. We did NAT before, now we're going to do PAT. Going to local server. I'm going to get rid of all these multiple IPs, just keep one. Now right here, what I can do is click on Advanced and just start highlighting the IPs I don't want. So I'm left with one IP address. You can have as many IP addresses as you want on any one interface. In this case, I only want one. I can do IP config. And now I only have one public IP. Okay, so now I'm going to type exit to close this out. I'm going to reconfigure NAT. Go into routing remote access. Guys, in a few minutes, this will update and correct itself. If you want to force update it, you can just click query or refresh rather, and it'll fix it for you. So I'm going to go back to routing remote access, highlight my server, disable it. I'm going to configure and enable it again. I'm just going to do a regular NAT router. There's my public interface. I'll choose my DMZ to NAT out, and I'll add my private once I get inside. Choose NAT, add a new interface, add private. Okay, so now I'm going to go to my public interfaces. And the last time we did this for NAT, but if we're going to do PAT, we're going to go here. So whenever I get any secure web traffic on this outside interface, I'm going to send it into my DA. So I'm going to go to secure web. If I get any 443 TCP traffic on this interface, I'm going to send it to 172.16.0.7. That's the IP of my DA. Because when a client connects, it's going to connect through a website. So what we're really doing is creating a web application here. So when that client connects, it'll go into that web application, and then that server will act as a router and a DNS server for IPv6 network, and the client will connect to that web server and then be able to be redirected to any other computer in the network. automatically. I need to do that same thing for web traffic, regular web traffic. Now, in a real network environment, I'm going to have public DNS servers that can resolve public.com. And I could have public.contoso.com. I could have put an entry in here for public.contoso.com and put an entry in here. Just to keep it simple, I just created one entry in here. So I want my outside web clients to use this DNS server as if it were a public DNS server. So I'm going to add a new one called DNS UDP. I'm going to change it to UDP and say for any port 53 UDP traffic, which is DNS traffic, send it in to my DNS server internally. We're only going to use this for one thing, to resolve public.contoso.com to our public IP address. If I had a real DNS infrastructure where I've registered my names outside, I wouldn't need to do this. It's just for this to get this lab working. Guys, it took me about 2 years to get this lab to work. So it's kind of a difficult setup. It's a really cool thing, and not a lot of people use it out in the internet. They should be, but they everyone's so used to VPNs when this is actually so much better. It's less tech support. So I'm gonna click OK. And the last thing I need to open up to my DA is actually the DA traffic. So I'm gonna call it direct access traffic. Port. It's a protocol is TCP. The port number that it uses is 62,000. And I want to send it into my DA server, 62,000. So when I get any traffic on this interface for 62,000 TCP, I'm going to send it into this machine, 62,000 TCP. Click OK. So I opened up 4 ports, 443 TCP, 80 TCP, 53 UDP, and 62,000 TCP. This is going to the DA. This is going to the DA. This is going to my DNS server, because initially I need to resolve public.contoso.com to my IPv4 address, and then direct access traffic, which is 62,000 TCP, to my DA. Once it starts talking to the DA, it's going to initially talk to the DNS server to resolve my public IP. It's going to go to my public IP, and that traffic is going to be sent to the DA. From that point on, this will become my DNS server for that IPv6 network. So I'm going to click OK. So I'm going to go to the DA and sign in. Other user. Now the DA is part of routing and remote access. I'm going to add roles and features. Remote access. I'm going to choose direct access. I don't think the routing is needed. When you choose routing, it chooses remote access, direct access at the same time. But if you choose direct access, that doesn't choose routing. Restart if needed, and install. I'm going to pause the video while it's installing. Okay, it's installed, so I'm going to now click on this, open the Getting Started wizard. Sometimes it doesn't open up for some people. So you might have to go to Tools and click on Remote Access Management. See, it's not opening up for me either. So I'm just going to click on Tools, Remote Access Management. In 2016, that worked fine. 2019, it's not working. Maybe if I updated this machine, it will start working again. So I'm going to click on Direct Access and VPN. I'm going to click Run the Getting Started wizard. I'm going to deploy direct access only. It's automatically determining that I'm behind my edge device, meaning I'm not on the router, I'm behind the router. My screen's frozen. Okay, I'm going to type in my public IP, my public name. Now listen, if I put in 10.0.0.2, it didn't allow me to click next in the past because it wasn't a public IP. So by resolving that putting a name here and resolving that to a private IP, which we're pretending to be as our public IP, it'll actually allow me to click next. Then it showed me all the settings I can make changes to. So right now it's going to create two GPOs, a client GPO and a server GPO. So I'm going to click. So I don't want to make changes. Those are the names that I want to use for my GPOs. Then for remote clients, I'm going to click change. By default, it wants to apply this only to mobile computers, meaning laptops, with a WMI filter. And I'm going to show you that. But I don't want to do that. I want to remove this. And I only want this policy, because we're in this lab environment, to apply to direct access clients. And under Network Connectivity Assistance, this will automatically get configured for us when we click Finish. So I'm going to go to Server Manager, Tools, Services. Now all computers have this pre-installed. All Windows 10, Windows 8, Windows 7 probably too. And I'm going to go and find Network Connectivity Assistance. So basically, this service is going to be responsible for starting direct access. Once we configure our policy, it'll automatically start this service. So basically, this is the service that's going to talk to the web probe host, in this case, our direct access server. If a client can talk to the direct access server, that means it's in our private network. So when I move this laptop or this machine out of our private network out into the internet, it will no longer be able to talk to the web probe host, which is our DA. And at that point, it will automatically start up the direct access and connect through the router, our public interface, to connect us back to the network. So this is the actual service that's going to handle that. I just wanted to show you what that was. So I'm going to click Finish. And basically, I want to go to Change just to look at this. We configured this in the beginning of a wizard. We're behind our NAT router, and our public name is public.contoso.com. We're not going to change anything here. It'll create a self-signed certificate for us. And not only does it create the self-signed certificate, it will update the policy so all the clients trust that certificate. I told you that our DA will act as an IPv6 DNS server. This is where it's configured. I kept changing this to my real DNS server, and I could never get it to work. Then I realized that my direct access will be an IPv6 DNS server for all my direct access clients. Not for everyone, just my direct access clients that are out on the internet. And it's pretty much set up. So I'm clicking OK and then Finish. Now, it's going to give me an error. I'll show you. Right there. So basically, it's going to do name resolution using something called NRPT, Name Resolution Policy Table. That's in a GPO. It's going to configure that name resolution policy table in my GPO. So I'm going to click Close. And if I click Dashboard, I'm going to get some errors. Give it a few minutes to update. But while that's updating, I'm going to go to my DC. I'm signed in. I'm going to go to Group Policy Management. So now I have these two policies. My direct access server settings will be applied to my DA. My direct access client settings will be applied to any computer in that group. Remember I talked about that WMA right here? That's my WMI filter that will I don't want to do that. I would like to show it to you though. Instead of applying it to a group like here, I could apply it a filter, meaning query my network for all machines that are mobile computers, then apply a policy to that as opposed to applying to a group. Let me show you that filter. It's basically two SQL commands. And it's going to query my Active Directory database to find any laptops. If you're a laptop, it will apply that policy to you. I'm not using the filter. I'm not using WMI filtering. I'm just going to use the security filter. So I need to fix some things in this policy. So I'm going to go to Edit. I'm going to go to Policy. Guys, I know that this policy applies to computers, not users. So all their settings are done in the computer configuration section, not the user configuration section. So I'm going to go to Windows Settings. And this is my name resolution policy table filter. It's a weird interface, guys. So I'm going to highlight it, go to the very bottom, highlight the first item in the list, then click Edit Rule. Then scroll up and go to the second tab. Make sure this is unchecked and this is unchecked in that order. Then hit Update. go to the next entry in our policy table. Edit role. Uncheck this, then uncheck this because you're already on the second tab. Hit update. Go to the third item in our name resolution policy table. Guys, the order might be different for yours. Don't worry about the order. Just do it for all three. Edit the role, uncheck this, hit update. Then once you've done all three entries in our table, go all the way to the bottom, hit apply. The next thing we need to do is go to Administrative Templates, Network, TCP IP Settings. Then we want to go to IPv6 transitioning technology. So guys, we're going to be using an IPv6 network inside an IPv4 network. So there's four technologies that will allow me to use an IPv6 network in an IPv4 network. 6 to 4, IP over HTTPS, ISATAP state, or Teredo state. Well, actually, it's not called ISATAP state. It's just called ISATAP, Teredo, 6 to 4, IP over HTTPS. I only want to use IP over HTTPS. But you might have clients on your network that are using 6 to 4, ISATAP, or Teredo. I need to make sure that those are turned off for this to work. So I'm going to go to 6 to 4 state and enable the policy and turn off 6 to 4. For ISATAP state, I'm going to enable the policy to turn off ISATAP. And then for Teredo, I'm going to enable the policy to turn off Teredo. I'm going to show you this, but you're not going to make any changes. This is already configured for us. Okay, so that's the only thing I need to change in my client policy was the name resolution policy table and the IPv6 transitioning technology. So I'm going to go back to my DA. And hit refresh. I'm going to try to reboot this machine. I'm going to pause this video. I'm going to reboot this machine. It just, I think it's a glitch. Okay, class, I rebooted the server thinking this was a glitch. It's not a glitch. There's an issue. I hit refresh again. It keeps coming up that way. I did some research, and it's a glitch inside of direct access for IPv6. Basically, it doesn't create a route for us in my routing table. We all have this routing table in all computers. Get net route, and it's missing one. I found this on a website. So basically, I'm missing an IPv6 route. So I found a solution on the internet. I'm typing it now. We didn't have to do this in 2016. Okay, so guys, um, I rebooted the machine, then I remembered that this was a glitch, um, and I just had to search for the fix again. We didn't have it in 2016. We only have it in 2019. If I update this machine, it'll probably automatically fix this. But so basically, we're going to run these two PowerShell commands. We're going to get our network prefix from our remote access, then add it as a route. So I'm going to select both of them and press play. It added these two routes. It added one route that made it persistent, meaning every time I reboot, that route will be there. So now I'm going to refresh again. And there, it's fully configured. Okay, so guys, my direct access server is up and running. Now I'm going to do something that you don't need to do. I'm going to show you that this works and how it works. But I'm just going to use my web server to test it. I'm going to use my web server as if it were a laptop. You don't need to do this. You can just watch from this point on. In fact, I prefer you not do this because I don't want you to mess up your network for other labs. So I'm going to go back to lab. Now, right now, my web server is located in the DMZ. So I'm going to move that web server to my private network. Yeah, those PowerShell commands that I ran, I normally don't have to run. So I can now see my web server is inside my private network. So I'm going to go to the console of my web server. I'm going to sign in as the administrator. Now we're just pretending this machine is going to be a laptop so I can demonstrate this. If we were in the real classroom, not doing this on ACE-IT, I would have another machine set up for this purpose. But right now I'm capped at 14 machines. So I'm going to go to local server. Go to my network card. I'm going to change it to dynamic. So I want to automatically get an IP address from my DHCP server. I can see that I got an IP address automatically. But I'm missing my DNS server. I'm going to try it again. Every once in a while it doesn't work in this environment. It's for some reason it's not passing out an IP address for my DNS server. Let me look at my DHCP. It's there on my DHCP. So I don't know why I'm not getting it. So I'm going to go back to my web server. I'm going to try to do it on the command line. Yeah, it's still not working. I'm not sure why. I think this is an ACE thing. I should be getting a DNS server as well. So I'm just going to manually put them in. Okay, so I just manually put these in. I shouldn't have had to. I don't know why. I mean, if I rebooted this machine, it probably would have worked, but just to save some time. So I moved this web server into my private network. I gave it an IP that's appropriate for the private network. So now I'm going to join it to the domain. Again, I'm pretending this is a laptop that can move in and out of my network. And again, you're not doing any of this. I'm just showing you this to demonstrate direct access. Yeah, I ran across that glitch before and I forgot that um, direct access had that issue. So as soon as I rebooted and saw it didn't fix, I like, let me research this. And then I remembered. Okay, so I'm part of the domain now, so I'm going to go to the DC. I'm going to go to Tools, Active Directory Users, and Computers. So this computer account now exists because I joined that computer to the domain. But for me to use this as a direct access client, I need to add it to that group. Otherwise, I won't get the policy, the direct access client policy that configures all the direct access settings. So I'm going to add this to the group direct access. I'm just typing direct, click OK, and it added to the right group. So this now will get the policies for the direct access client settings. I could wait a little bit to get the policies, or I can force it by just rebooting the machine. So I'm going to sign in as a domain account. Now the setup for this is a lot more intense than the setup for VPN. But once you get it set up, it's a lot less work to support it than the VPN. Because you don't have to worry about setting up the VPN clients on every machine that leaves your network. This will get a policy, it'll configure everything for you. So when you have these non-techie people leave your organization and go out into a hotel room or to a Starbucks, it does everything automatically and they're constantly connected to their private network at all times. So I'm just going to reboot this machine so I get the policies. because when it booted before, it wasn't part of that group. Now that it's part of the group, when I reboot, it'll apply the policy. Okay, it's rebooted. I'm going to sign in. So I'm going to do GP result slash scope. I just want to look at my computer policies, and I'm going to redirect that to an out file. I get so much text it'll scroll off my screen. So I'm going to redirect my output to a text file, then open that text file with Notepad. Notepad out file .text. So this shows me all the policies that I got. So for this machine, the two group policies that I'm receiving is my default domain policy and my direct access client setting policy. If I don't have this policy, this isn't going to work. So I do have my direct access client policy. So this is right now believing it's a laptop. So I'm going to do get DA connection status. And I can see I'm connected locally. So I'm now going to move this machine outside my network. So before I do, I'm going to manually fix my DNS again. In real life, I would have a registered public DNS server and I wouldn't have to do this, but I don't have one. So I'm tricking DNS. So when this is out on the internet, I want it to go here for name resolution, which will send it into this machine that will resolve public.contoso.com to this IP. So I'm going to go back to lab after I fix my DNS to point to my public interface, and I'm going to move this out on the internet. It's like all I'm doing is taking the wire off this computer and connecting it to a different switch. So I'm going to go to my network diagram. So now I moved my web server out here. I'm going to go back to the web server. I'm going to do an IP config all. It didn't give me a public IP, so I'm going to do IP config release, and then renew. IP config all. So it gave me a public IP address, something appropriate for our public network. We're pretending it's to be public. Uh, all that information is fine, but I hard coded the DNS server to point to my public interface. I don't want to use Google's DNS server. I want to use mine because I need to be able to resolve public.contoso.com to our public interface. So now I can see I'm connected to the internet. Just to test it, I can ping. So I can resolve Google, no problem. So I can resolve public names, plus I can resolve my public name. So now I'm going to do get DA connection status. I have to give it a minute. It still thinks it's connected locally. Give me 1 second. Let me disable my network card and connect it again. Okay, so I just wanted to let it know that it's not connected anymore. Just might have to give it a minute. See, now in real life, guys, your computer would have disconnected from the network automatically, and it would have triggered this to automatically realize that it was connected to a public network. So now I'm connected remotely. All I did was just wait a few minutes. I'm going to go here and show you the service. My network connectivity assistant is now running because my group policy for direct access client settings turned this on. So it can see that this is running and this is the service that realized it couldn't talk. It was getting an error that it couldn't talk to the direct access server. Well, that's because it wasn't in the same network. So it had to give it a minute to realize it was outside the network, and it automatically connected me. So if I wanted to ping dc.contoso, no, dc1.contoso.com, look, it's able to resolve that name to an IPv6 address. So if I do NSLOOKUP, this is going to work because I'm using my internal DNS server. Um, you know, this name resolution is all occurring because of the direct access server, not using my regular DNS. So if I wanted to get to a network share or get to anything that's any resource that's available in my private network, I would go through the DA, and the DA would allow me to connect to that other machine because my DA is acting as kind of like a router. Um, so, I could do ping ipam.contoso.com. And again, it's given that IPAM server an IPv6 address automatically. Um, it's obviously not, ping isn't open up on that machine, but at least it's allowing me to resolve that IP to a name. So if I had any service I'd be offering internally on my private network, I'd be able to connect from this laptop. I'm using air quotes right now. It's not really a laptop. I'm just pretending that it is. So basically, I moved this web server out into the internet, made sure that I had a public IP, made sure I could resolve public.contoso.com to my public interface. And at that point, direct access kicked in and realized that I was no longer part of my private network and then remotely connected me to my DA. So it's kind of like a VPN. Now, all my traffic between this machine and my DA is being encrypted with that private SSL certificate. Okay, so guys, I know some of you are going to want to test this service, and there's nothing I can do to prevent you. But if you're really not comfortable with everything I've said so far, don't mess with your web server. Just assume that it's going to work. Um, it's going to take, I don't want you to mess up your network trying to get to test this. Just assume that it's going to work. I'm using my web server just as a test client. In our classroom environment, I would have another machine altogether just to use to test this. But um, guys, I just want to show you that PowerShell command again for the direct access fix, and this is only for um, server 2019. You don't need to do this on 2016 or 2012. Okay, guys, that's it for this video. There's only one lab left, which is the DFS lab, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.